Ladies and gentlemen, if we can now speed a little bit the entry and come and have a seat because we have a speaker online who is waiting. And we have our moderator who has a flight to take. So we will not go over time. If not, we have to bring Matthias back home later.
Yeah, someone
And
has
Stu flight. Come on. Great. Ale, let's start. Matthias, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everyone, for being on time, for being disciplined. Excellent. We now have an hour in front of us with two keynote speakers and a highly interesting panel. Welcome to the audience. We will talk about the challenges of linking EU's industrial policy with R&I measures. There is a lot to talk about, especially foreseeing the next MFF. And the next MFF is also the catchword for our first keynote speaker, and I'm absolutely happy to introduce Davide Lombardo. Davide is the Deputy Head of Unit for the STEP task force within DG Budget. Unfortunately, Davide is not physically present today, but he's online. Davide, thank you very much for taking the time for speaking to us. We look very much forward to hearing the latest from DG Budget, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Just a second. Can you hear me? Can you hear me well? Yes.
Yes.
I was saying that as a second best, I think it's nice that you could accommodate my intervention online. As was mentioned, my name is Davide Lombardo. I'm in the STEP task force in DG Budget. We have two main tasks. One is to implement STEP for the current MFF, and the other is to help in the design of the next MFF. I would say just a few words about STEP so that I then can jump very with more time on the next MFF, which I think is perhaps even higher on your agenda based on your program. So just to say, the STEP was introduced last year in March, so we just celebrated 1 year of implementation. It is an effort by the European Commission to better steer its funds that are currently arranged by a multitude of spending programs towards pursuing the EU priorities, in particular the manufacturing and the development of critical technologies in biotech, deep and digital technologies, and clean tech in Europe. And given the news from yesterday evening, I don't have to emphasize how it's important that we worry and try to enhance our strategic autonomy in Europe, including with the development and the production of these key strategic technologies. STEP is doing quite well, if I can myself say so. We have, on the 31st of March, there was the deadline for some incentive for cohesion policy programs to redirect their resources towards these critical technologies. And I'm happy to report that although the numbers are still being crunched, we have now had requests to amend programs to support critical technologies under STEP by some 19 member states. So it's a quite widespread response that I think we can take note of and indicate that it's indeed important to coordinate and steer the resources towards common EU goals. Um, I mentioned this because, in a way, STEP is a bit of a pilot for the next MFF. And the next MFF, as you might have seen from a recent communication, is expected to be presented in terms of Commission proposal in the summer, sometimes in July. And there is a lot of ambition in-house to make sure that the budget for the next multi-annual cycle is as impactful as it can possibly be. And this reflects the fact that I think it's on our under our eyes that the spending pressures are increasing by the day. There is a lot of demands on the EU budget, including um, perhaps most notably recently to support the defense efforts of the EU. But there is basically not an equal forthcoming effort when it comes to the revenues of the EU budget. So the EU budget remains relatively limited in size. It depends on the contributions of member states until and unless there is an agreement on equipping the EU budget with new own resources, where the discussion is a little bit stalled at the moment, not for lack of proposals by the Commission. And therefore, there is a very big premium on making sure that absolutely every single euro achieves the maximum EU value added. And from this perspective, I would like to reassure you, because I know that this is a concern based on my many interactions with several of your members in the last few months, that research is an obvious candidate for EU funding support. The value added of research is extremely high, especially when it is implemented through collaborative efforts and with a cross-border angle. So I think if you look at the political guidelines of the president, if you look at the latest communication on the next MFF, it's quite clear that research is going to be front and center, including, which is very important for my unit and for DG budget, when it comes to supporting the competitiveness, which is in fact very much aligned with your program. So just to bring everyone on the same page, the current idea on the next MFF is that it would have three main planks. There would be a plan that is basically called a single plan. There is resources allocated and managed by member states. This would be based on investments and reforms. There will be a strong attempt to incentivize both. This, as usual, as you probably know, this is the bulk of the EU budget. Then there will be a European Competitiveness Fund, which will be managed by the Commission. And then there will be a third plank, which is everything that has to do with the external action of the EU. And there will be also, of course, some programs which are existing today, and they have their own legal basis, and they will continue to exist in the current form, like, for example, ITER, to give you an example. So, but the main three planks will be what I mentioned. And I think research, as we know it, will be supported, that will be included in the European Competitiveness Fund. Here, I want to be very clear. There is no question that an important part of research has to be basically free or bottom up. Basically, we have to support research that pursues knowledge for its own sake, because we know by experience that ultimately this generates over time very critical spillovers on innovation and productivity everywhere. But there is also a need to, based on the feedback that we have received and on the position of many stakeholders, including perhaps most prominently the Draghi report, there is also a need to make sure that the applied research is very much linked to necessary and needed market outcomes, and that we do better in transforming our innovativeness into actual concrete products which make us stronger, more resilient, and also more autonomous, if you wish, from the other countries. So for the main goal of this European Competitiveness Fund would be a bit to change the perspective on how the EU budget is designed when it comes to competitiveness. As I mentioned earlier, today the EU the competitiveness is supported from a financial perspective through something like 14 or 15 EU spending programs. This creates unnecessary complexities, it creates redundancies, and perhaps even worse, gaps that need to be addressed, in our view, in the next MFF. So, a first line guiding principle is that the European Competitiveness Fund and the next MFF more generally will be based on policies to pursue rather than on programs to manage and implement. Um, Also, it's very important, as I mentioned at the beginning of my intervention, that we ensure like a very strong amount of steer and coordination, including with the envelopes that will be assigned to the member states. And again, here, in my view, STEP is an interesting experiment because we have experienced that when we try very hard to coordinate and to incentivize, the member states actually do respond. And I think it would be important, therefore, that that political priorities are established at the highest level, including with the feedback of the stakeholders in the appropriate committees and fora, which are all being studied and thought through. But then, basically, after this is done, that the budget is indeed focused on these key priorities and does not get the impact of the budget does not get diluted unduly, unnecessarily, with an attempt to pursue everything, um, as is probably the approach today. The other very important guiding principle is that we want to make sure that the EU budget can support these companies and projects from throughout the life cycle. So from basic research, but all the way to development and manufacturing. And also, we will try to support the important projects of common European interest, or IPCEIs. Finally, and I guess this is another area where our experience, including through the feedback that we receive daily, has been important. There is a strong drive to present a budget and a structure of the budget that allows for simplification, that allows for easier access, not only to the funds themselves, which is going to be difficult in a sense because the funds are still limited, as I said at the beginning, but at least in terms of accessing the information about the funding and the application to the funding. So here for example, again, take off from a current situation that presents dispersion of information, fragmentation, and we have run as a STEP task force a survey late last year on our portal of on the experience of the likes of yourselves and the SMEs and companies more generally to access EU funding. And there has been a very strong feedback that the landscape is too complicated, it is too costly to make sense of it. Many give up even without trying. It's perhaps not necessarily your case because you are very experienced in approaching EU funding, but still, I think if you pause for a moment, you will realize that we have not been so far fully successful in efforts to simplify and to make the landscape clear. So, as I mentioned, the proposal is coming in July. In the meantime, there is a lot of possibilities for feedback to be provided, and I would like to encourage all of you to do so. There are impact assessments that are being conducted, including for specifically for the European Competitiveness Fund. And so if you Google, you will be able to locate the page on the Commission's website where the feedback can be provided. We also, as STEP task force, are carrying out an evaluation of the STEP, which is a bit early perhaps, but nevertheless is required by our regulation. And also for that, we have a call for evidence, which is a call for feedback and insights from the potential beneficiaries, which I would also be very appreciative if you could take the time uh, to consult and to provide your feedback. I will stop here. I would like to again just drive home once more time the message that we are discussing the structure of the budget, the framework of the budget, but there is, and that's why you probably hear a lot about this streamlining, the steering, and perhaps less about research. But still, I want to emphasize that there is, all the discussions about the quantums of the different areas will have to take place later. But there is a strong, commonly shared understanding that research has a strong EU value added, especially fundamental research, but also collaborative research, applied research, and that it will be an essential component of the European Competitiveness Fund and hopefully a strong support to EU competitiveness in the crucial years ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Davide. If I look here in the room, I would say that your message that the RNI community is being heard and our input is valued when it comes to STEP is very much welcomed and much appreciated. Is there an immediate question to Davide? That's not the case, so I'd suggest another great hand of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for taking the time. And
My pleasure.
Let's be in touch. And of course, we will also answer your call for the STEP request. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and have a good meeting.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to invite our second keynote speaker of our session. I'm really pleased that Andrea Gentili could make it in person to join us. Andrea is the deputy head of the Clean Transport and Clean Transport Transitions unit in DG RTD, a DG that is very well known to all of us. So it's a great pleasure to have you here. We are very keen on hearing the latest from DG RTD. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, distinguished participants, boys and girls. Yes, for the invitation. You will know at the end of my presentation why I decided to accept this invitation. In the meantime, just a few clarification. I will split my presentation in two parts. I will give you this example of what we are currently doing in the field of aviation. And then, in the second part of my presentation, I will try to give you some indications of what we are planning to do in the context of the new MFF in the field of research and innovation in every areas, in all areas. Why? Because on top of this responsibility of being the deputy head of the unit dealing with all the transport, research and innovation, I'm the head of the task force in the Commission in RTD dealing with partnerships. And you know that there are many partnerships in all areas: health, energy, transport, digital. And partnership in particular, public-private partnerships, are a good instruments where we can have at the same time industry, research centers and academia that we call the private, and the public. The public sometimes represented only by the Commission, sometimes also member states. So, few slides on what we are currently doing with aviation. Aviation is a very special area which, and research and innovation in aviation is tackled for the moment already since 20 years by different programs. So in Horizon Europe at the moment you have the 3 pillars: scientific frontier research. We have found some research there, bottom-up, that are relevant in the field of materials, for example, for aviation. And also so the EARTO. In Pillar 2, the major programs are in Cluster 4 and Cluster 5 for obvious reason. Cluster 5 dealing with energy and transport, and Cluster 4 dealing with digital and manufacturing. You know, there are lots of composites in the current Airbus A320 or A319 that you are currently using when you go here and there in Europe for holidays or professional reasons. And in Pillar 3, recently we launched a call last year, focus on transport. You know, Pillar 3 is, EIC is a bottom-up like ERC. However, there was a specific call for 50 million that we said, listen, focus on transport, in particular high technology startups for transport. So, and then we have deployment programs like innovation funds, the CEF, for all the related infrastructure. If you work on a nuclear-powered jet engine for the future aircraft, of course you need to adapt the airports to deal with hydrogen, to store the hydrogen, and so on and so on. So CEF is also dealing with this, and of course Digital Europe, European defense, aviation has a strong element of dual use. But the main program is the Clean Aviation Program. The Clean Aviation Joint Undertaking is implemented through these partnerships, institutionalized, so an independent legal body, which at the beginning, 5 years ago, at the beginning of 2021, yes, so 4 years ago at the beginning, was chosen to be focusing on breakthrough. When the companies came to us to propose a continuation of the Clean Sky 2, and they said we would like to improve the existing jet engines so that we can reduce CO2 emissions from 25, 35%, we said incremental research is not interesting for us. We are not saying that it's not relevant, but it can be done with your money or the money of the member states. At European level, we focus on hydrogen, propelled aircraft, liquid, gaseous, fuel cell, whatever, or hybridization, electrification, full electric, and so on. So this is a major problem, the major focus. And then, now, in the implementation of this program, we may have the first prototypes of hydrogen-propelled aircraft ready to be tested and certified in 5 years from now, 2030. And then we discovered that there is, in these chains of different programs, there was a weak ring. It was the ring related to the certification testing and which is currently due by research and technology infrastructure that are here in this room. So that's why we said it's important that we provide support for those research and technology infrastructure to update their capacity, to update their systems in such a way that they can accommodate hydrogen if we want to test an hydrogen-propelled jet engine. They will need to deal with batteries at not at 300, 600, or 1,000 volts, but 6,000 volts. That's not easy. So we need to provide this. So basically, already a few years ago, we had already the bell ringing. This project already told us, hey, we need to work on the RTOs in order to test and certify the new technologies, in particular for aviation. Why in particular for aviation? Because the process of testing and certification in particular takes a lot of time. So we need also to shorten this time. So in October, we, together with prominent RTOs that some may be in this room, I don't know, DLR, NLR, ONERA, just to mention a few, CIRA. We worked on this and we identified the 16 specific needs. Some of those are physical, some are also digital. The digital twins that you might have heard are important instruments. And then we tried to scan the existing Horizon projects in Pillar 1, in the part of research and infrastructure, Pillar 2, Cluster 4, in particular for all the testing equipment for materials. I mentioned the composites. And in Cluster 5, there is a specific topics for updating, for example, wind tunnels that will be adopted in the Work Program 25. Okay, now just a few ideas what's happening. The stakeholders are now getting together for looking beyond Horizon Europe. But in all areas, we are receiving vision document, a position paper, saying all the sectors and all the partnership would like in the future to continue their existence. Fair enough. So we have received a position paper from the hydrogen, the clean hydrogen, the clean aviation, the CESAR, the EMI, the innovative medicines initiatives. But is this the way that we need to continue working in the future? So we said to the aviation communities, hey guys, you do have 2 joint undertakings in your area, specifically the clean aviation and the CESAR 3 for ATM, air traffic management. Does it make any sense to have those 2? The joint undertakings are encrypted in Horizon Europe. In Horizon Europe, we can do only pre-competitive research, so we cannot do deployment activities. Does it make sense to continue with this fragmentation of the program? And then, of course, the suggestions and what my colleague has just said about this competitiveness fund, it was good music for our ears, because in the competitiveness funds, apart from the distinction of the frontier research, which has an independent legal base, the rest is basically into one instrument that we don't know yet how it works. My colleague Davide didn't provide any real details about how it will work, but at least it will allow to do this. So now, just very quickly, the Commission, in relation to the importance of research and technology infrastructure, the Commission is planning to adopt a specific strategy on RTIs before the summer. There will be the adoption of the second ERA policy agenda 25-27 with lots of elements that will be of interest for you, because there is a special area, Area 12, dealing with RTOs. This will be in May. And this would be the opportunity to jump into the second part of my of my intervention, Commissioner Zakharieva, in a very recent event organized by the Clean Aviation Joint Undertaking, said clearly that we need to develop a common strategic research and innovation agenda. She said, of course, for the aviation sector, but aviation can be, in a way, replaced by the words EU competitiveness. So a common research and innovation agenda for the EU competitiveness, bringing together member states and the industry and covering the entire innovation chain. At this point of time, we know what we need to do, but the question is how. When you start, you go in a restaurant, a nice restaurant, you know that you want to have a nice dinner. You have a menu full of things. You don't know what to choose. You don't know in which direction. So we needed to have advice. We needed to have recommendations to be guided, and not many. We need to choose a starter, a main dish, and a dessert, and eventually a good drink, which could be possibly a good wine. So I said we need the four recommendations. So the first advice, we found it in one document, a document from an association that you may know, I hope. A document which was published in December, which contains several recommendations, but I just would like to pick up one, or two, which could be merged. The first one saying focus more strategically on some partnerships, you said, okay, co-program and so on, and develop a better portfolio approach. So this is the first advice for choosing the starter. We need to focus. We cannot have, like at this moment now, 49 plus 10 partnerships which have been launched in the Commission during the midterm assessment recently, covering everything. So we need to focus, to choose. My favorite starter when I go to the restaurant is a very simple one: mozzarella and pomodori, mozzarella and tomatoes. Good ingredients, critical. So we need to select what are the critical sector for the EU competitive industry. So my message to the different industry, even the aviation industry, is in the context of this ARIX exercise that they are currently doing, you need to show in which way you are really critical for the EU competitiveness. This does not mean because, I don't know, automotive sector came to us and said, we have 22 million jobs. Okay, automotive sector, by the way, it's an exception because it's been already rewarded by an initiative of the Commission. We have now published in March the Automotive Action Plan. But all the other sectors, we need to make the point, to have a narrative why they are critical. Now, the second, I would need to choose now, the starter is done, I need to choose the main dish. And my favorite main dish, okay, you might have heard my accent, I'm Italian. So my favorite is seafood spaghetti. Seafood spaghetti. So the second document which was found where I could find these pieces of advice, this advice was exactly this one, a document that you also may be familiar with, where basically it's written that we need to have an increased budget and address all the TRL spectrum. So we need to make sure that the future programs for aviation or any other sector could tap into all TRLs. Fragmentation doesn't work. And in particular, if you want to increase the impact and accelerate the impact, industry cannot wait. And we know, even a geopolitical situation, now we cannot wait. We need to go faster. So this is the second element. And by the way, I have not chosen the drink, I have not chosen the wine. I'm fond of Sauvignon. Even in the previous document, but in this document, you can see something which is always recurrent, the simplification. It's the third recommendation here. Simplification. It's a Sauvignon Blanc, which will accompany us during the menu, during this nice dinner. And then, okay, I still need the third, which is the dessert. What could be the direction for us for working? And you may, I think you may not be surprised if I tell you that I found these pieces of advice in another document, which is a document from this association again, the EARTO association, on specifically on the competitiveness compass, where here I would simply take the suggestion to work in cooperation with the member states. Until now, there is little or almost zero cooperation with the member states. Member states in aviation, they have their own program. In Europe, we have our program, but we do not really talk to each other. So the cooperation with the member states, it's very important. And now, just to make an example, my favorite dessert, now you know a lot about myself, is the tiramisu. But I've never tasted, the best tiramisu that I tasted in my life was in Belgium. You know why? Because in tiramisu, you know the ingredients of the tiramisu normally is done with Savoiardi type of biscuits, Italian. In Belgium, they do the tiramisu with the very Belgian biscuits. Le speculoos. And it's great. So basically, the idea is, if you take the best from two or more, of course, you can achieve better. So this is the message. Working with the member states will be difficult, but it has to be done. I'm about to conclude because my moderator is rightly pushing me towards the conclusion. I just would like to show that what we have done and what we have tried to do with those four major ingredients for the future work, fully in line with the Commissioner Zakharieva, my commissioner, in charge, by the way, not only of the portfolio of research, but she is in charge of the startups first. And she always reminds that the startups goes first. She is indeed responsible for startups and research and innovation. So I stop here. A big thank you to all of you for your patience. You have been great, but in particular, I would like to thank EARTO for the recommendation and the pieces of advice. It was a wonderful dinner. Thank you very much.
Andrea, thank you very much. I'm very, very sympathetic to your gourmand expertise that you presented us today. And we are also very pleased that you not only read what we write in EARTO, but that you also take this as an ingredient to your dishes. Thanks a lot. That was an excellent presentation. I would like to open the floor if there is one immediate question towards Andrea. This is not the case. Maybe you are still around for the lunch break and everything?
Yes.
So then we'll continue. That's your timer. We're right on time. Thank you very much, and a big hand of applause. Thank you. That was great. Thank you. So now, without any further ado, I would like to invite to the stage my esteemed panelists. I'll ask Anne van der Bosch from IMEC on stage, Eric Drop, TNO, our esteemed colleague Joan Gouache from Eurecat in the great city of Barcelona, and Michel Viktorovic from IFPEN in France. Dear panelists, welcome. It's a great pleasure to have you. Thank you for being willing to share your experiences with us. It is our challenge now in the given time frame, that is short, to explore the challenges and I think also the opportunities of linking the industrial and the research policies. I think the industrial policy at European level has seen quite a revival over the last couple of years. Yeah, you've seen many IPCIs, all the other industrial policy instruments. Interestingly enough, there is also quite some criticism. And one of those I just briefly want to mention came just recently from a German expert board on research and innovation, and they said, well, this is the industrial policy is nice to have, but it's not a substitute for the failures in other policy areas. And it also will never substitute for the lack of willingness to invest in research and innovation. I think that's a good starting point for our exchange today. And I would like now to give you panelists the opportunity to give a very brief intro statement, and we'll take it from there. So I suggest we start with Anne, please.
Thank you. I will try to talk very, very fast. So I think in the past years, we all have been used, if when we see the framework, to think in terms of pillar. You have something for the universities with ERC, you have something for the startups, which is more in the IC, and then you have this big pillar in the middle, which is industry and RTOs. And there are several topics inside, there are multiple funding flavors inside, there are work programs going on. In essence, when you look at it, it's quite complex. Then on the other side, you have the Commission, and the Commission says, you know, we want this EU competitiveness to go up, we want to reduce the dependencies we have outside. So actually what they would be needing would be more something like, okay, let's go for something flexible, let's go for something focused, let's go for something which is fast in implementation and something which actually also has some money for infrastructure. And to be quite honest, I think that's also what we want as RTOs. We want to move fast, we want to help industry, we want to make EU more competitiveness. And one of the first examples there is the EU Chips Act, and we can discuss further later on. But I think for us, for RTOs, there is an important role to play by sitting at the table next to Commission, next to national governments, and crafting the instrument that would be needed to then bring success to the EU industrial policy.
Excellent, Anne. Thank you so much. 3 buzzwords that are focus, fast, and flexible. 3F.
Yes.
Anything to contribute to that?
My turn, you mean? Or yeah?
Your turn, Eric.
I'll do
Sorry,
to
Eric.
contribute to the whole discussion. Well, maybe I haven't heard that, but Commissioner Zagarieva in her mission letter also had a 3% target, I think, on GDP within the European Union to reach, which means that's a political choice, but at least 1% public funding or expenditure and 2% private expenditure. I'm from the Netherlands. We don't reach that. We have less private R&D than is necessary. That means per year in the Netherlands, 7 billion euros extra private funding. I talked to someone of Business Europe who said on the whole of the EU, it's 150 billion euros per year extra what is needed. In my belief, collaborative research is the mean to evoke additional private R&D for the future. So that's where the emphasis should be And maybe Andrea, the main course is the most important part of the dish. So collaborative research in that sense could say that it's the middle part of the whole menu, and that should be the emphasis as well. We're talking about the next MFF, but maybe even at a shorter term, there are also challenges. For instance, the Dutch Commissioner Hoekstra, has launched a Clean Industrial Deal, and I was talking to someone of his cabinet, and I asked her, is innovation an important part of the Clean Industrial Deal? And she said, well, it's the only raw material that Europe has, innovation. So there should be a lot of emphasis. But the problem is, if I really look into the plan, I don't see innovation that much. So there should be also towards the future a real emphasis on R&D in the Clean Industrial Deal, also in REARM, and involvement of the policy DGs that are also working on that. Last part of my intervention in that sense is that if we want the startups and the scale-ups for the future, and that's what's been showed by colleagues like Alexandra and Joa also, that it takes 10 to 15 years sometimes, but also starting in collaborative research. So that is also really pivotal for the future. I talked to Michiel Scheffer, the president of the European Innovation Council, and he also said we need the collaborative research and the RTOs especially in that. So maybe to not have a quote, but something to end up with is maybe we could say to Mrs. van der Leyen, please put your money where the brains are, and that's at RTOs. So.
Excellent, Eric. Thank you very much. 3 buzzwords from your intervention: investments, make everything collaborative, and the third one, I think the brains are also good, but I think the third one that really struck me was endurance. Some things take time.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yes, so here I'm speaking from an ecological transition perspective. So we are an institute in France working on this field, and our main objectives here in this research environment, actually we have 2 of these. First of all, we are here for fueling the debate, because before creating the solutions of tomorrow, we need to advise on how could be the scenarios that we will have tomorrow. And the second point, obviously, once we have the scenario, we have to industrialize the solutions, bring them viable on the market. And for this, we need to have a solution-oriented approach. It's true, we need to be fast, but in a slowly manner, if I can put it that way. I mean by that when you look at the lead times you need for developing, for instance, the LED lamps, I don't have the number exactly in mind, but it's several decades before it comes to the market. Yeah. Innovation in this field takes time. It's like that. And it takes time, it takes money, and it needs huge projects. So by essence, collaborative, because when you do a large, big demonstrator, you need a lot of people around the table. You need researchers, you need the industrial persons, and you need the political points as well, because at the end you need regulation to put these solutions on the market.
Mm-hmm. Michel, thank you very much for this first intervention. I have 2 buzzwords, and that is solution-oriented and long-term perspective. Thank you. So, Jean, your intervention, okay, and then I'll do the buzzwords again.
Okay, thank you. Well, the main topic is about industrial policies and research and development policies. And I think that the link between those 2 policies is the I, the letter I, the I for innovation. And indeed, in the European Framework Program, we do also have the pillar 2 that I prefer to refer to it as a bridge, because it is really the bridge between the research, the labs, and the market. And that's the point, that's the main activity. If we look into the details of the pillar 2, we can see, and we have seen during the last years and programs, that it is so-called collaborative research. This morning we have heard Jesus and Teresa talking about collaborative and collaboration and these things. So we have that, and it's there. So, and moreover, if we look inside that, we have an instrument which is excellent to perform innovation, the innovation actions. In this sense, what is probably missing is the use of that instrument as a tool to better implement, to really update, and to use that to improve the existing technological infrastructures that many of the RTOs have nowadays in Europe. So not to diversify, not to generate more, but to update and to really make them sustainable. And then last but not least, we also have to take into consideration that we have also to update the employees and the labor market. So skills need also to be considered important and relevant to make that innovation happen and to make it useful for the private sector.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think there are 3 points to take in mind. First, you mentioned marketing, not in the sense of selling products, but marketing in terms of developing markets, yeah, where you find then everything that you need for your implementation. Implementation being the second buzzword here, and the third, of course, skills, which is absolutely vital. I think we can touch upon topics like skills shortages and what to do about this later on. Now, if we look at industrial policy initiatives and acts that are already existing, of course, the CHIPS Act immediately comes to our minds. The CHIPS Act is already there, and interestingly enough, the CHIPS Act has a research pillar, which is exactly what we RTOs find very suitable, because the research pillar should be there to establish within with the tool of pilot lines, to establish the solutions of tomorrow, and maybe even for the next decade. So we do not only support the scale up of industrial production with subsidies, but we also care about tomorrow's solutions. Now, Anne, IMEC has plenty of experiences, let's say firsthand, and I would be interested. I know it's early days, but are there any early lessons that we can already draw from the CHIPS Act and the pilot lines in the CHIPS Act when we talk about better linkages between industrial policy and R&I policies?
It has been an interesting journey, the CHIPS Act. Let's start with that one. I had to say that actually already from the beginning, when we knew that this was going to come, it was fairly clear also for us, if we wanted to help industry, not only did we need to go to higher TRL, but we also needed to the research that is coming with that, and also actually moving further and giving the industry the handles it needs to then later on be able to use what we have been put forward. I know that's very high level, but in essence, if you put the tools there, you do the process, industry cannot come in and go and sit and do the tools itself. It needs to provide the design and we will make it, And in essence, it took a while to convince the Commission that also the RD&I was necessary, And they followed us there and they said, okay, RD&I pillar is there, that is where the funding will go, Later on, of course, we will still need to see how we can bring the users in, which also will be an important follow-up trajectory that we still need to run. And also the fact that Commission came in and actually was willing to also support part of the CAPEX funding was for us a first. There are also some, so it went fairly fast. We are already working on it. We have some first results we can show. For we see interest of industry already coming there. But I also want to put a little warning there. It's not only working with Commission. It's also working with the member states. And that is not something we are always used to. We are used to go and write a funding program and we get the funding. from Europe itself, but now we're confronted with actually us needing to make an ecosystem, yeah, where we work together with academia, with industry, but also where governments, the national governments, are becoming an important player for us to take into our ecosystem and to talk to on a regular basis to help us craft these funding models we will need in the future. And we cannot forget that there would still be need for us, yeah, to have funding programs where only the Commission would fund our funnel, which then will find its way to industry.
Excellent, and I think that resonates very well with Andrea's comments about the involvement of the member states. This is certainly something to thoroughly look into when we think about the next funding periods. Now, Eric, you were emphasizing the need for collaborative R&I, particularly at the EU level. Now there is, you know, this old debate. Every one of us is aware of this. There is usually also programs with single beneficiaries. Now, how would you justify that there is a stronger need for collaboration and maybe less a need for single beneficiaries at the European level?
Well, it's a bit like Anne already said, member states are also very important. I think that maybe at member state level, a single beneficiary could be more pointed out, but it is European money, so we should think cross-border also to participate across borders of member states. That's the European added value in that. So in that sense, when you think this through, especially the collaborative research part is the essence of working together within Europe on innovation. And as I said, I think it's in our way of working as an RTOs, we don't realize that enough, that we're always thinking about involving industry, thinking about the policy DGs or at member state level, other ministries that are also involved, and combining that with the flexibility. I admire IMEC in that sense, how to make a CHIPS Act and pilot lines work. I think Anne already said that's a lot of work, so we have the flexibility in mind to involve member states at the national level, but the emphasis should be on the European level, how to collaborate amongst each other and with private companies especially to evoke more private R&D towards the future.
Thank you, Eric. Michelle, something struck me in what you were saying, and I would like to ask a follow-up question related to, let's say, the degree of innovation in European funded projects. Again, something that resonates with what Andrea said, because there was at least implicitly, if not explicitly, the suggestion that in many of the collaborative, pre-competitive projects at European level, they are rather incremental in nature and not that innovative. So it's not about reducing CO2 emissions by 35%, but it's about the technology change to hydrogen or to batteries. Yeah, I'm very provocative here. So is this your experience from the projects that you do at IFPEN?
Well, first thing, I think we won't do the ecological transition we have to do just by incremental. So that's one statement I believe in very strongly. So if we're incremental, we are going to miss the targets, obviously. That's one point. Second point, I'm just taking maybe a brief example of a project which was funded by the European Commission in IFPN, which is CCS, industrial CCS, carbon capture, or CC actually, carbon capture project in Dunkirk. So it ended up by a European project, collaborative, demonstrator, huge, lots of money, well, at least seen from IFPN, lots of money, and successful on a steel company, ArcelorMittal in Dunkirk. The project was finalized, I think, in 2023, something like that. Very successful. Now we have the solution to decarbonize. But before we reached this point, we had 15 years work. It began in 2008 with fundamental research within IFPEN. By the way, we had to slow up the research in the 2010s because we are ahead of market. The market was not expecting yet this kind of stuff. It was too early.
Yeah.
And the world is the world, and things have changed in the late 2010s, and suddenly carbon capture came back on the scene, and we were able to develop. So this is, for instance, one example where I think we do see innovation in this kind of projects, and we see it. Competitivity between the projects which are submitted is very high as well, and that I think brings us as well to the quality of the projects and the level of innovation we might see in those projects. And actually, seen from IFPN, when we run for that kind of projects, innovation is at the heart of everything we're trying to do.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we only have time left for one question, but Jean, that might also be an interesting sum-up question. Now, the famous genie in a bottle, huh? You find it, and this genie is very special. It says, "I'm an RDI policy genie." Very special thing. Very rare, actually. Yeah? But you might find that on the Valencia beach. So there's one wish to RDI policymakers. What would that be?
Finally, to secure more budget for this type of projects.
It's a very wise wish if you only have one, huh?
And if possible, secure it for the coming years, because it is also difficult for the EARTOs to define a strategy all over the coming years if the money is moved from one box to another box, and we have to hurry. And not also for the EARTOs. I'm sure that this is also happening in the companies, and especially for the SMEs, which are the most common industries in Europe. So, in summary, more budget for this bridge, which is so-called Pillar 2, and secure it for the coming years.
Very, very well thought of. Michel, a bit briefer if possible.
I will use a French expression, which I translate in English and which doesn't make any sense anymore when we do that, but it's a culinary expression. I would like to know the sauce with which I will be eaten, which I think translates in English like the fate and what the fate has in the shop or something like that. Basically, it comes back to what my colleague here just said. Very briefly, I mean, today, Europe needs money for a lot of things but science. Point one, science today is at risk all over the world because of political attacks, because of many things. So if I have to say one thing, I think we have to be very strong together, to have a very high voice, to explain that science is at the heart of a lot of things and that we need a lot of money for many years if we want to address the challenges we are facing.
Thank you. Eric, what would be yours?
Please, Jeannie, make Mrs. van der Leyen put the money where the brains are.
That's perfect. Great. Last but not least, Anne, what's your genie going to do?
Simplification.
Excellent.
That is what my genie has to do.
That's wonderful. And with those very brief statements, I would like you, thank you, to give a big applause to our panelists. It's been a pleasure to be your moderator. Thank you very much. Enjoy the lunch break. Thank you.